Whispers of the Vanguard Alchemist. Listen to my voice. Pause. Make soft breaths between lines. And watch the sea, scenery, cities by night, small fire. Follow this deep, slow inhale, soft whispers, low harp tone, then relax into a calm, steady whisper. Listen. The world will try to name you before you can name yourself. It will hand you labels: daughter, migrant, outsider, professional, refugee of memory, and expect you to perform them like a costume. But there is another pressure, the pressure to vanish into a platform's feed, to become the algorithm's polite echo. Tonight, let us come together, the wandering, the hybrid, the orphaned at heart, and place our hands on a different mirror. We will breathe, we will read, and we will practice. We will learn gently how to choose who we are. Part 1. The Label Trap. Roland Barthes taught us that a sign does not simply point, it makes meaning. Say that again and let it glow a little. A sign is not a neutral arrow, it is an apparatus of translation. It arrives encoded with a language of expectation, a whole grammar that tells you what to do with your face, how to pass your appetite, which parts of you are edible for the public, and which parts must be wrapped and hidden. Labels are not neutral. They are theatres. They arrange us into roles, assign lighting, cue the applause, and sometimes lock the door. Labels carry histories. When someone calls you immigrant, they do not hand you a fact. They hand you a shorthand of centuries, border laws, cash economies, exoticizing gazes, stories of sacrifice and suspicion. When they call you professional, they attach another history, institutions, networks, class rituals. These histories live in the syllables of the label and hum under your skin. For the multilingual and the uprooted, labels are thrown like stones. Each one dents the surface. Each bruise rewrites the story you tell yourself in the dark. You learn to measure your worth by the edges of those bruises, how visible they are, how quickly they disappear in daylight. You begin to behave for the label, to inhabit its expectations, because habit is survival, and survival is a gentle tyranny. Barthes reminds us that signs do work in the world. They produce behaviours, economies, and habits of attention. When an institution labels you, markets and manners rearrange themselves around that label. You are offered certain roles and denied others. The label becomes a map, sometimes a trap disguised as a path. And yet we have been trained to accept maps without asking who drew the borders, which rivers were erased, which deserts were paved over. Now listen to another teacher, Samuel Beckett. He loved emptiness because he trusted the truth that sits when performance falls away. Beckett's theatre, famously barren, insists on the nakedness of being. When all the props are removed, what remains is not nothingness, but a concentrated field where the bare human voice matters. If labels are noise, the world's dialects playing over one another, then silence is an instrument. Silence is not erasure, but tuning. It allows certain frequencies to emerge. In that silence, you can hear the rhythm of what is truly yours. There is a practical magic in Beckett's austerity. Try it. Remove one public performance you give yourself regularly, the script you recite at family dinners, the persona you offer at networking events, the tidy version of your biography in the short bio box. Observe the vacuum. At first you may feel naked, exposed, dizzy. That is the sound of old grammar loosening its grip. After the dizziness comes a different sound, a lower register, a note that had been swallowed by applause. That is where your true voice waits, patient as seed beneath frost. And then Sartre, existence precedes essence. Whisper it into your palm and let the words warm. You are not a pre-written character slotted into someone else's scene. You exist first, messy, unfinished, breathing, and from that rawness you may, with courage, choose your essence. This is radical because it turns social prescription on its head. It makes identity a verb. You are not merely the recipient of categories, you are a maker of them. Choosing your essence is not vanity, it is survival, it is art. But how do you choose? The philosophical injunction is sharp, the work is slow, choice requires practice, not once, not as a declaration, but as a daily choreography. Begin with small acts, a phrase you will not allow into your mouth, a question you will always ask before accepting a role, a refusal you will rehearse until the muscle remembers. Each small refusal trims the edges of the imposed label. Each small affirmation stitches a new seam into your garment of self. Imagine your life as a room full of echoes. Each echo is a voice you have been taught to repeat. The work of delabeling is not to silence all echoes, that would be cruelty, but to learn which echoes are invitations and which are ghosts. Roland Barthes would ask, who benefits if you repeat this echo? Who has structured the echo to serve some economic or psychic order? Beckett would ask, what remains if all echoes stop? Sartre would ask, what will you do with the silence that opens? The answers are practical. Close the doors to scripted rooms. Keep the hearth where you practice spontaneous saying, and invite into the room only the echoes you have chosen. There is an anatomy to the label's power. First, it names. Naming is binding. It produces a frame around behaviour. Second, it prescribes. Once named, someone else can write the manual of your conduct. Third, it monetizes. In our digital economies, labels are convertible into attention. Attention becomes currency. This is why platforms thrive on labels. They refine you into commodities that travel well in feeds. The platform does not want your full, messy being. It wants a high-resolution tag it can sell. So how do we resist the conversion of ourselves into tradable tags? The resistance is not brute force. It is a craft. It begins with hermeneutics, learning to read the sign not as fate, but as discourse. When someone imprints a label upon you, practice translating it, aloud, in a private notebook, into a sentence that reveals its mechanics. If you are called outsider, write, whom does this outsider exclude? What economy benefits from my exclusion? Then answer, what parts of being outsider are instruments of strength? Which of its contours do I want to keep? Which do I want to shave? There is also a social tactic, communal renaming. Labels are easier to resist when you do it together. In historically marginalized communities, resistance often takes the form of joyful resignification, a slur reclaimed, a language revived, a story told anew. Renaming is an act of public poesis. It says, we will not be defined by the scripts of dominion. We will compose our own lexicon. There is power in a collective chorus that insists a word means something different. Finally, there is the intimate politics of ritual. Beckett's emptiness becomes a method when you ritualize silence. Choose a daily hour where you refuse the sign system. No emails, no social feeds, no curated self-presentation. Spend that hour in the kind of quiet Beckett trusted. Read something blunt and simple. Walk without narrating the walk into your feed. Write until the sentence you want to keep appears, and then stop. Ritual practice reconditions the nervous system. It trains the body away from reflexive performance and toward deliberate presence. And presence is the keystone of Sartre's claim. When you act from presence, when your gestures are admitted as primary rather than derivative, you begin to live the existential line, make a choice, stand by it, and accept the burden of freedom. Freedom here is not freedom from constraint, it is the burden of authorship. To choose an essence is to stand under the heat of responsibility. Your choices will create consequences you must manage. That is the cost of real life making. So begin with small experiments. Try on a word that is not assigned to you. Say it aloud. I am a maker. Repeat it. Let the echo feel strange, then familiar. Practice a silence ritual. Make a ledger of expectations you refuse for 1 week. Write the first line of an essay about yourself that refuses the label's grammar. In time, these tiny acts compound. Over years, they become a different architecture of self, one that is not merely patched onto another's map, but built of your own hands. This is not self-help flattery, it is an ethical apprenticeship in the craft of living. Barthes, Beckett, Sartre are not aristocrats of theory, they are calibrators. They teach you how to cut the rope between the naming that binds and the choosing that frees. Labels will still land, people will still expect you to perform, but you will learn to greet the landing with another question. Who placed this name, and what am I going to do with it? In the quiet that follows, listen for your rhythm. In the pause between the label and the response, you will find your voice. Choose there, choose often, choose kindly. Choose as if survival and beauty are the same thing, because in the end they are. Tonight we start small, not by overthrowing nations, but by rewiring the small circuits that make identity, your morning rituals, the way you tell your story at tea, the phrase you use when you introduce yourself. Part 2. The Mirror and the Shadow. In the mirror of our devices, we see both our longing and the world's conveniences. Foucault teaches us about power that is diffuse, not simply top-down. Power shapes our gestures, the grammar of our digital speech. The algorithm is not a tyrant with a crown. It is a field of forces that rewards what is repeatable, comfortable, shareable. Kristeva named abjection what we exile to the margins of the self. Many of us learned to exile pieces of ourselves to survive. Perhaps it was language you dared not speak, grief you learned to hush, a hunger for belonging you disguised as ambition. The machine comforts by mirroring the acceptable parts, but the more we outsource what frightens us to a mirror, the less we learn to carry our own shadow. Listen to this small story. Like, subscribe and share with a friend or a colleague. Your ideas count a lot for me and my team. Comment your favorite idea so far. We plan around your needs and likes. Now come back to your breath. Softly inhale. Repeat calmly. I learned how to rebuild an inner life en route. Not the glossy highway of brochures, not the interstate that flashes neon and exits, but the old coastal ribbon that leans close to the Atlantic. The road where salt wind writes its own grammar across your skin. I drove alone at first, in a borrowed car that smelled faintly of citrus and old vinyl, the map folded into the glove box like a promise. My luggage was 2 simple things, a notebook whose pages already had my fears written in them, and a small smooth stone someone once pressed into my hand and said, "Keep this, it will bring you back." The morning I left, the city, glass, steel, predictable motion, looked like a suit I had worn too long. New York hummed like a rehearsal. People moved in rehearsed arcs, their lives scheduled to the minute, their selves trimmed to fit a frame. I loved that precision once. I profited from it. But profit, I had discovered, can be a poor midwife for the soul. So I went south, not because of climate or cowardice, but out of curiosity, to see what belonged to me when I was not performing for my audience. I wanted to measure the difference between a life designed to be liked and a life designed to be lived. I stopped in a town where the sidewalks remembered horses. The diner there served coffee that tasted like patience, and the waitress spoke like a woman who had many small fidelities, family, salt, routine, and guarded them with wry humour. She asked my name and then, without waiting for the full story, brought me a cup and said, "You look like you need a good map without a route." She placed a paper napkin in front of me and, with a pen she had tucked behind her ear, drew a circle. Inside it she wrote, "Here, breathe, stay." There is a small American theology to such kindness. It is practical liturgy. The circle on a napkin became my first public commitment. I wrote in that notebook a sentence I would return to often. I will cultivate a room inside me where applause is not the only thermostat. Driving further, the road unspooled into a baptistry of light. I watched porches catch the afternoon and let go like a blessing. I paused at a lighthouse that kept its old job, though the world had made radios of its keepers. The keeper, a man with hands like weathered maps, handed me a cup of tea and said, "People come here when they want to see where the light begins." He spoke as a man who had learned to trust small work. He told me about a family that had kept the lamp for generations, how each kept a ledger, not of profits but of names. Sailors saved, a child who learned to read by the lamp's tilt, a small wedding on the rocks. He looked at me with a kind of quiet hazard. A light is only useful if it is tended. You cannot wave it and call it a light. At night I slept under the hum of ceiling fans in motels that smelled of lemon cleaner and possibility. I read Rilke in the dim, then walked to the shore where the surf sounded like distant applause that had learned to soften. In the dark, a man in an old fisherman's cap joined me. He introduced himself as Thomas, and then, as if offering a trade, asked me for my trouble. I laughed because the question itself felt like an invitation into a small truth. I told him about labels, how the world wanted me to be author, expert, mother, success, how each name glittered with duty and expectation. He listened as if my words were driftwood. When I stopped, he reached into his pocket and gave me a tiny thing, a scrap of fishing line knotted into a loop. "This is for keeping," he said. "We tie small knots so the big nets do not tangle. The American landscape teaches you this. Knots matter. The country is a stitched thing. Highways and railroads, diners and orchards. Each stitch was once made by a hand deciding not to unpick. You carry knots the way you carry promises." I wandered into a city of music, New Orleans, where the air is layered like a good perfume, where grief and joy sit at the same table and trade recipes. I found a small club where a woman at the piano wore a hat that had seen tributes and bad weather. She played a melody that was more confession than entertainment. The audience leaned in not to rate her, but to be altered. After the set, I spoke to her. She said, "Music here is not a product. It's an invitation to remember. If you're selling the song, you have already lost the house." She laughed and poured me a piece of pie that tasted like domestic archives. What I collected on that road were not souvenirs. They were practices. The waitress's napkin circle, the keeper's ledger, Thomas's knot, the pianist's pie. Each was a small pedagogy. They taught me to make boundaries that were bones, not paper, to value rituals that restore rather than spectacles that impress. One afternoon I reached the vineyards of California, where light pours like wine into the land. The rows of vines made me think of fidelity in agriculture, long patience, pruning, attention to small economies. I sat with a vintner, a woman who had left the city to make soil tell stories. She said, "We prune so the fruit can stand. We do not try to decorate every branch, we choose." Choice, that was the key I had been seeking. In the city, the choices were often reactive, to be louder, to be faster, to optimize a brand. On the road, the choices learned to be patient. They accrued like terroir, small decisions that, over time, define the flavor of a life. By the time I looped back north, my map had changed. I still had gigs and contracts, lectures to give, and books to write. I am not a hermit on a cliff, but I returned with a new architecture. The pebble in my pocket was heavier, not with gravity, but with permission. It reminded me to pause before the vanity of the next performance. It taught me to ask, is this decision a pruning or a decoration? Will it feed my roots or merely dress my branches? A friend in Boston asked me as I unpacked whether I had found answers. I told her, not answers, but a set of vows. I read them aloud, small promises, walk before writing, refuse 3 invitations a week that serve only optics, hold a silence every Thursday at noon. She laughed, and then, touching the pebble in my palm, said, "You have found a small religion. Perhaps that is what we trade in when we become adults of intent. Not grand institutions, but small liturgies." The American dream I found on that ribbon was not a billboard of overnight success. It was a table where people came to keep their hands busy in work that tended, where neighbours mended what was frayed and called it living. If you are on the edge of a step, wondering whether to leap into some new identity the world prescribes, consider this. Buy yourself a small ritual. It need not be expensive. It can be a stone, a scarf, a ledger, a vow. The richest currency on the road is attention shaped into habit. Commit to a practice and watch the market of your life shift. Buyers, those who will pay for meaning, will sense the difference. They will be drawn not to a polished product, but to someone who holds depth like a secret and gives it as a gift. On my last night, in a little town where the lights held their breath, I sat by a window and watched a family walk home. A child ran ahead, calling the night into play. The parents followed, slow and deliberate, hands linked. I thought of all the performances I had once believed would save me. I thought of the pebble, the napkin circle, the knot. Then I breathed, slow and full, and whispered to the road, "Thank you." The road taught me a new commerce. It taught me how to sell nothing and give everything. It taught me how to make a life that people will want to join, not merely buy. So keep a pebble. Wear a scarf that remembers your seasons. Make vows that are small and fierce. The country is wide, the market loud, the options many. But in the quiet architecture of habit, you will find a clientele for the only thing that pays, presence. That is the practice I invite, ritualized remembering. Part 3, the power matrix, tools for reclaiming voice. We use 3 instruments. Promise me you will try one tonight. AIQ, design intelligence. Use technology, do not let it use you. Audit the tools that shape your speech. Ask who trained this model, whose voice is amplified. Choose a prompt that prioritizes your minority idiom. Teach the tool to sing your register, not replace it. EEQ, emotional ethical intelligence. Practice conversations that repair. Start with curiosity first language. Tell me how you thought about this, instead of why did you do that? In private, practice an EEQ script. Pause, name, invite, repair. I will say it with you in a moment. SSQ, social sustainable intelligence. Create social scaffolds that make authenticity inexpensive. Form a 4-person circle who promise to read each other's paragraphs once a week. Hold a small public ritual, 1 minute of origin story before every meeting. Make institutions small and sacred. Let us practice an EEQ script together now. Breathe, pause, inhale slowly, exhale, pause. Place a hand on your heart and breathe twice. Name, quietly say, the voice in me that I hid is. You can name a feeling, a tongue, an image. Invite, whisper, I will speak this for a friend tonight. Repair, say, I will do one small thing to honor this voice. A paragraph, a call, a shared meal. Small repair builds muscle. Part 4, Stories of Rewriting. Listen to 2 soft stories, one male, one female, both true in their patterns. Michael, city-worn, learned to make himself invisible to avoid rejection. He found a forum where strangers read small confessions and offered steady, kind replies. Over months, Michael learned to risk short truths with a neighbour, a tiny exchange of bread and thanks. His voice gained weight. The platform had been a training ground. The practice shifted into flesh. Aisha, daughter of several exiles, was told she was too many things as a child. She practiced the origin recall each morning, a tiny 2-minute story of one place she loved. She started in the kitchen with her mother's recipe. She then wrote 2 lines and sent them to an old cousin. Her family replied with details she had forgotten. Those replies wove her back into belonging. These are not miracles, they are stitches. Part B, Rituals for Tonight. 3 practices, try them tonight. Origin recall, 3 minutes. Speak aloud one memory that shapes your voice, not a philosophy, a smell, a sentence, a rhythm. Record it or say it to a low voice and keep it. Pause and declare 60 seconds. Before you post, before you reply, say, I am using this tool as practice. Say it to your device to lock the intention. It reduces absorption. Voice share. Weekly. Choose one person. Read a paragraph you wrote without editing. If you fear shame, set a rule. The listener responds with one question, not judgment. That's the repair ritual. Try the origin recall now. 3 minutes. I will count softly. Breathe in. 1. Breathe out. 2. Begin. How was that? Gentle? Sharp? Did something well up? Part 6. The political work of belonging. To be hybrid is to live in 2 histories. Foucault would remind us that power disciplines through naming. We must also discipline ourselves in returning names. Gayatri Spivak asks, can the subaltern speak? And if they do, who hears? Your voice matters because the world around you is not neutral. The political work of belonging is slow. Create small institutions, reading groups, shared meals, a weekly ritual in your workplace that codify plural speech. Create a public mirror map in your team. List 5 phrases you hear repeated in your department that gatekeep belonging. Sit with the map. Change 1 phrase next month. Part 7. Closing prayer promise. Let us promise one small thing. Not revolution, repair. A pledge that when we see another practice invisibility, we will name them kindly. That when our tongues betray us, we will invite repair. That when the machine sings a mirror song, we will sing back a counter melody, our mother tongue, our small recipe, our odd joke. You are allowed to be many. You are allowed to be changing. You are allowed to choose what you keep and what you leave. This is not betrayal of origin. This is resurrection of voice. If you want the guided toolkit, the mirror map, the companion use charter, and the EEQ repair scripts, download the starter pack below. Join the Vanguard Praxis Circle and practice with us. We meet weekly in a small cohort to read, to speak, to repair. Go gently, speak your name in the morning. If you are tired, rest. If you are brave, speak one small truth this week and give it to a friend. I will be listening. Share in comment and like, just like and subscribe. We do the rest of the work for you. Bye for now.